104.7 The Cave, KKLH, Marshfield, Springfield, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Touchdown, Kansas City!
Now, it's time for Ned Talk.
Yep, here we are on a beautiful, beautiful spring Sunday, and we're sitting around talking about sports. I'm Joe Westen, your cat wrangler for this show. Ned Reynolds to my right, Ned?
Which of the cats am I?
I don't know. Which cat do you want to be?
Not necessarily the lead one, but yeah, great day, wonderful day. Palm Sunday, beautiful, sunshiny day. Hey, it just bodes well for having a lot of big wins today.
We were a bit distracted going into the show because Alex Scott was regaling us with his stories of urination at the Cardinals home opener. Alec, how are you?
I'm doing well. Not my urination, but urination of the public variety that I saw on the way back to the car. Crowd had fun. It was a good time, and baseball's back. It's a good day.
Josh Roberts, who's been in Kansas City and Cleveland since being here.
Yes.
How
I'm
are
glad
you?
to be back. I'll say this again. I told you earlier, Cleveland does not rock.
Well, if you could replay last week's show, which you could do as a podcast through our website, 1047thecave.com, or through the Cave streaming app. You can also find it by searching out Ned Talk. You could see how wrong we were about the games that took place last weekend, and now we're down to just two in the NCAA tournament, UConn and San Diego State. Ned, what do you think?
Well, the fact of the matter remains, I can't imagine that anybody picked those two to be in the championship, but Connecticut is no fluke. They're a very good basketball team, and so is San Diego State. When you take a look at the Aztecs and what they have done defensively over the last 10 years, they're going to be in a lot of games, and their defensive unit this year is very good. Now, can they stay with UConn? I don't think so. I think UConn is too powerful on the front line, have just a great array. They also have a Hurley doing the coaching, the older of the two Hurley brothers. And these guys, their basketball acumen is just wonderful. But over and above all that, Connecticut is a very good team. I think Connecticut wins the national championship, but I would not sell San Diego State short. They have, I think, their last three games prior to, well, the last four games, I guess it is, in the tournament, they've all won by 1 point.
Wow.
Now, that's playing some pretty serious basketball.
Yeah, that's tight.
I think that was pretty exciting. I saw the recap of it this morning and how close that one player was that hit the winning shot for San Diego State. I mean, he was just, a micro millimeters away from the back line, and he was able to stay in bounds, hit the shot, win the game. Even though these aren't the sexy Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, Duke sort of teams, you're seeing some really good basketball this year.
Oh, gosh, yes. And you have two very good coaches. Dutcher, San Diego State's coach, comes from a long line of coaches, and the Hurley family is renowned back east for all their coaching. They're good teams. And UConn, they got this big kid who plays Sudoku, who is he's hardly an unknown, one of the top high school recruits in the country when he came in. And he is proving himself to be every bit as good as as all the notoriety was. So yeah, it's a good basketball team.
Alec, your thoughts on the tournament? I think you were one of the ones that was definitely wrong last week when your picks.
Well, I
think you had something to prove. I think came out of your mouth at one point.
I do believe I rolled with Texas, but I think I picked San Diego State to win at least one of the matchups. But we'll never know. It's neither here nor there. But it was really, that first game yesterday was a ton of fun. Both FAU and San Diego State really played well. Ultimately, one more shot was made by San Diego State. UConn just rolling through everybody. They've had a double-digit win in all of their matchups in this tournament, and they're definitely looking like the team to beat. I probably would have liked to see FAU play them just because FAU's offensive prowess has shown a little more throughout the tournament, and I think that's going to be needed to keep up with what UConn is putting out right now, as well as San Diego State's defense can play. I don't know. UConn's hitting every shot they put up, and they're just running really efficiently right now. But we just continue to get treated to really good games, and all I can hope for as someone who doesn't have a vested interest because my bracket's on fire is that we just get a good game Monday night.
Josh, your thoughts?
Well, my bracket burned down like the first weekend, so I've been able to just enjoy what games I've been able to see. San Diego State beat Alabama, so I'm rooting for San Diego State. They're scrappy, like Ned and I were talking about before we came on the air. They're a scrappy team, and I think they'll hang in there with UConn. I think you'll be surprised how close they play it with UConn, and who knows, maybe they can squeak out another 1-point victory.
Okay, I'm going to take over the role of MC here. I'm going to ask you three guys the same question. I want your opinions on this. San Diego State did win. They won their games by 1 point. One of them was over Creighton, and that was last weekend, in which they got a foul shot to win the game with 1 second to go. Did you guys see any of that? Now, all right, Alec, would you have called that foul?
Probably not. I'm more of a proponent to let it play out in the end, near the end of a game. But I mean, and when you look back on it, if it's the one I'm remembering, he definitely had a hand on the midsection. I can see why they did. The contact was there, but it just feels better when a game ends on a made basket rather than a free throw.
All right, Josh, did you see the play?
I didn't. I saw the highlights, and I don't remember them even really addressing that. So.
Oh, really? With 1 second? Oh, no, that was it was a point of controversy.
Oh, what? I guess I didn't see the right highlight then.
The kid worked off a pick and did a great job working off the pick, drove the lane, and the defender came from behind and just barely nudged him. I say barely, I wasn't there. I watched it on TV, but it looked like he nudged him in the rib cage, and the shot fell short. 1 second to go. Kid made one of two foul shots, ball game. What do you think?
Well, any time that somebody's shooting and it affects the shot, I think you have to call the foul. And I guess my question would be, how did they call the game up to that point?
Rough.
Okay, well, then they probably should have swallowed the whistle on that
They
one.
let him go. All of basketball these days, I was talking to an old friend of mine just the other day. Gosh, when we played the game, if you touched somebody, it was a foul. Now, my God, they're playing football out there. No, they had called it. They had allowed a lot of physical contact in the ball game, but that one, the announcers were, in all honesty, incredulous. He's called a foul. And then they didn't voice any kind of political comment. They just said, with a note of incredulity in what they said, he called the foul, and the kid made the one shot, and that's ball game.
Yeah, I tend to think that they should let him play in situations like that, too, especially towards the end of the game, unless it's very blatant.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that wasn't blatant enough.
It was debatable.
And I can see where you're coming from, too, Joe, because typically, if it's affecting your shot, then, yes, there should be a penalty for that.
Well,
but if they haven't been calling it up to that point, why did they suddenly decide to call it this time?
It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, because you don't know what happens at that point, whether somebody's screaming. They should have called a foul there. That should have been a foul, but they didn't call it. So it's you can't win for losing in those games.
Referees are in a no-win situation.
But I think you have to be consistent.
Well, that's the damning aspect of basketball, in that it is so subjective in how it's ruled. It's not like baseball, where it's you see what's going on the field, and maybe an umpire's decision somewhere along the line comes into play. But in basketball, it's instantaneous, and you have to make that decision right then. The philosophy of the game has changed now to the point where it is very physical. Physical contact is expected, but what constitutes the annulling of a shot and the creating of a foul, as opposed to let them play?
Right, and that's where your subjectivity comes in. That's up to the referees to decide.
Exactly.
You would, like Joe saying, I just hope that they're consistent, because that's when I get upset, is if they're inconsistent with it.
Speaking of the referees, in the first game, the Florida Atlantic game, in which San Diego State won it on that shot, two of the three officials were Valley guys, John Higgins and Kip Kissinger. They're down here all the time. I'm anxious to see who gets that championship game coming up, which will be tomorrow night.
Nice.
But guys, there's a game before then, too, like this afternoon.
2:30 today, yep.
Yep, you're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cape, your local live sports talk show. Ned Reynolds, Alex Scott, Josh Roberts, and myself, Joe Westen. That game that Ned was talking about, the women's NCAA championship tonight. It's LSU and Iowa.
Yeah, they're playing this afternoon.
This afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
sorry.
Mm-hmm. And LSU, Iowa, I think it'll be a tremendous game. And I think the darling of the whole group is Iowa, of course, with Caitlin Clark playing for them. But I don't think they're going to win, and I'll tell you why I don't think so. They really spent a lot of energy on that court, winning over a very physical South Carolina team. South Carolina, my God, they're big and they're muscular on the baseline, and they got most of the rebounds in that game. But they got maybe outplayed a little bit in the backcourt by this Clark girl, not just shooting, but with the assists that she had. But over and above all that, Iowa had to be fatigued after that game, and now here they are, less than 48 hours coming around and playing another Southeastern Conference team that is just as physical as South Carolina, LSU. It'll be a tough assignment for them. They've got to be fatigued.
I think it'll be fun, though, because I think we've seen in basketball this more than any other team sport, one player can make all the difference. And South Carolina was the best team in that tournament, and Iowa had Caitlin Clark. And Caitlin Clark goes for a 40-piece and accounts for every point or assisted on every point in the fourth quarter and wills Iowa to victory.
What a player.
And she's done it now, too. That's back-to-back 40-point games in the Elite Eight and the Final Four. And I think she's going to have to do it one more time if they want to win it.
That's just it.
And I don't know. We're looking at someone who's playing really well, and I think she could do it. That's possible.
They had a play, and I just marveled at it, too, because she's the one. It wasn't necessarily her scoring, but they had a little tandem in the backcourt where the center would come out and set a pick for her. Caitlin would throw the center of the ball, and the center, I've forgotten her name now. It's a big burly kid. Throw it right back and roll, the pick and roll, and they made it work every single time. And South Carolina just looked at it. That's a pretty good play. Scoring these 2 points on and on and on. My God, that's really ultimately what won it for them.
Yeah, Josh, your thoughts on the women's tournament? Just shrugging your shoulders.
Well, I was shocked that South Carolina lost. So, I mean, I'm excited. I'm going to watch this game because I'm excited to see Iowa. And I agree with Ned. These tournaments are such a war of attrition that by the time you get to the finals, sometimes you don't see great basketball because both of the teams are so worn out and beat up. But I would love to see Iowa win this. I mean, they knocked the giant off of her perch. I mean, South Carolina was number one with a bullet, and everybody expected them just to tear through this tournament, and they pretty much did until Iowa got them. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an exciting game, I think. And LSU is solid. LSU's been solid for years. They're another one of those programs in women's basketball that's always in the top.
LSU was undefeated for much of this season until they played South Carolina, lost. LSU ended up losing 2 games. I don't remember who the other one was, too. It may have been South Carolina again, but over and above that, they're an interesting basketball team. Kim Mulkey's their coach. She's very flamboyant. She wears these very colorful outfits and she does it on purpose. She calls attention to herself to take it away from the team so the team won't have quite the pressure on them. But they're a really, really good basketball team. They were number 3 in America for much of the season. They can play, and they are just as physical as South Carolina is. It'll be a heck of a matchup.
It's been a great tournament on both sides of both the women's and men's side of basketball. I mean, it's been very exciting. A lot of talk, a lot of people into it. And more so than I can remember in the past couple of years. It seems like it's just the enthusiasm, and that's perhaps from COVID, but I think fully you can say the NCAA tournament's back now at this point.
Well, the transfer portal has a lot to do with that, and COVID is the reason for the transfer portal, which is here forever. And players leaving to get more pay and all this sort of thing. Who would have ever thought 10 years ago we'd be talking about the players being paid? Well, here they are, and it's all legal. Although I do think there are some ramifications that have to be made to it. But the fact of the matter remains the parity of basketball now in the colleges, both male and female, more male than it is female. The female teams are probably 10 to 12 to 15 that are elite. And with the men, there are probably about 50, 60, 70 teams. Again, that's the level of talent that we have in this country. It is very good, and it's solid basketball.
Let me ask all three of you this question. Do you think that basketball, the state of college basketball, is better today with it being more team-oriented than it was, say, 15 or 16 years ago, even 10 years ago, when there was these really big names that came out of each and every team and draft, and we just haven't had that for the last 2 or 3 years in college basketball.
Oh, I think it's probably a ratio that you go through each year. You're right, probably haven't had the Jabbars and the Chamberlains and the people who come in, the Pete Maravich and people of that caliber, the individual stars on the team. But each team does have a key player to whom they rely as far as the leadership of the team. And in women's basketball, this girl who's going to play this afternoon, Clark, is certainly that person. She is the Iowa basketball team. She makes it go. Back in the era of Jackie Stiles, she's the one who made it go for the Lady Bears. Has it morphed now into more of a team situation? Well, Joe, the talent level is such that it's pretty difficult to have one key player taking over a team at every aspect. And defenses are a lot different too, as is scouting reports and so forth and so on. But when you bring in these players, I don't think there is the one individual as such who is head and shoulders above everybody else. There's a 5-team All-America group, of course. This kid from Connecticut is a 2nd-team All-America. But in terms of one single star, no, it just doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, right there goes to my point, is that it used to be when you would watch college basketball and you would say, Danny Manning, for example. You go, everybody knew Danny Manning, and you just referred to the kid from Connecticut. I mean, the names just rolled off your tongue because you knew those people. And I think for the past few years in the NBA, you've seen a lot of those guys not really develop into being great basketball players in the NBA. So it seems to me like there's this kind of transition going on with basketball, and I think part of that's the youth sport of basketball is incredible. I mean, it's really well structured in the United States.
Well, keep in mind now that when you're comparing college and the NBA, those who have transitioned into stars, they don't really stay in college very long.
No.
And they don't learn the craft of the game. That's the beauty that I don't think resonates with a lot of these kids going in. They can be a one and done and all that. Well, a lot of them don't have the talent to get in there right away and play the game. And we can cite many examples of that. But if they were to stay around and benefit from the coaching and the playing at a top level of the game, they'd be a lot better when they went in the NBA.
It is an interesting year to me because you mentioned both the coaches in the men's division. And again, they're not names that trip off the tongue. They're not the Mike Krzyzewskis. They're not the Bob Knights. They're not Dean Smith or anybody like that. And I think that shows the parity of the sport all the way through and how it is really changing. Alec, what are your thoughts? I mean, would you like basketball the way that it is now? Or are you a guy that wants to see a Larry Bird, Magic Johnson matchup?
I mean, no one would turn down a Larry Bird Magic Johnson matchup, but
Right.
But at the same time, it's really exciting when you can go into this tournament. And this year was such a good example where it's like, all right, look at the field. Who do you think? And you kind of just have to shrug and say, any of them. It's like it's just so much talent across the board, and a lot of really good players. And when they play as a team really well, you often find those teams making the surprise deep runs. A lot of juniors and seniors, they've been together a long time. And that teamwork and the just acing the fundamentals like that can beat talent. Alabama had Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller was probably the best player in college, men's side of college basketball this year, and it carried them a very long way. But ultimately, they got beat out by a San Diego squad that just played better as a unit. And, Brandon Miller's going to go and be a top 5 NBA pick, and we'll see what happens to Alabama basketball going forward. But it's really, we will see. But I think it's more fun now when you just never know what's going to happen. But until it gets too close and all of a sudden the seeds don't matter because if the difference between a 15 seed and a 2 seed is negligible, then it almost turns into a random draw. But then what's the regular season for? That's a whole other can of worms. But I think the state of it's great right now. And I mean, I was looking forward to this tournament for a while going into it, and I'd say it's lived up.
What do you think, Josh?
Well, I love the parity in college basketball. I like the fact that there's no clear-cut number one. I like the fact that there's not a dominant school right now. I think it seems like it's cyclical. You know, we're kind of cycling out of all of those top-tier coaches that we've known for so many years because they're all retiring. Like Jim Boeheim retired this year, and he was another one of those top-tier coaches. So now you've got this next generation of coaches that will – some of them are going to rise to the top, I feel, in the next few years. You're going to see there will be another big standout coach that becomes that next – okay, every year this team's going to be a contender because of their coach. Because what's going to happen is as that team has success, that's going to improve their recruiting, which will improve their team and then create the possibility of another dynasty. But right now, I love the fact that it's so up in the air.
Well, we'll discuss more college basketball and football and baseball because that started over the weekend. When we come back, it's well over the week. Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network.
And we sit here on a day when baseball is back. Alex Scott traveled to St. Louis to see the Cardinals opener. They lost, but what was the vibe, Alec?
Vibe was great. They said the attendance was second largest opening day crowd they've ever had, and you could feel it even just from parking and walking up. The tailgaters had been out. The beer was flowing very freely, and everyone was ready for baseball to be back. And we had a beautiful day for it, and it was pushing 65, 70 degrees and sunny by the time first pitch was thrown. Adam Wainwright surprising the crowd, stepping out and doing the national anthem. The lid blew off the place when that happened. And it felt good to be back in there and to have it back. And despite the loss, which, can't put any on the offense, Cardinals had 14 hits, I believe it was, and it was either 8 or 9 runs. That's going to win you more games than not. Just got to hope the pitching can maybe catch up a little bit. But the place was ready to go. St. Louis is excited to have the Cardinals back on, and 1-1 through 2. If they can win today and win an opening series against a good Toronto team, that's a good way to start the year.
Traditional thought in baseball is that pitching's a little ahead of hitting, but right now it looks like hitting's a little ahead of pitching.
Oh, I think it depends on the teams. For instance, the Toronto Blue Jays playing yesterday had 7 runners on base via walks, and yet they couldn't bring anybody home against Jack Flaherty, who in his prior spring training game had gotten lit up by, I don't remember who it was, but I think maybe the Astros beat him 24-1. He didn't give up all 24 runs, of course, but he gave up 6, I think, 6 in 2 innings or something like that. So I think a lot of it depends on where you are and what the circumstances are. Flaherty did not look very good to me at all, although he pitched over 5 innings of no-hit baseball. Of course, he's walking everybody. None of them scored.
Walked every other guy, but
they didn't get a hit and didn't score. So you've got to give him credit for that. And today they're going to throw the kid from the New York Yankees, Jordan Montgomery, put him on the hill against a good Toronto Blue Jays team. And then the Cardinals get no time off because the Atlanta Braves come into St. Louis tomorrow night.
Jordan Montgomery, I wish he was still with the Yankees.
He's been good for us, and it was interesting to watch the offense because this was the first game watching where the shift's officially out. And I will say I saw quite a few hits where it looked like the infielder was just a couple steps away and the ground ball trickles through. And you just have to imagine in, last year, there's probably a guy standing 10 feet back in the outfield grass ready for that because they shifted and were prepared for it. So that's going to be something that we're going to see. A lot of people around me were also complaining about the pitch clock, saying it doesn't actually speed the game up at all, but that was just the nature of that one particular game. You just can't speed up that much offense.
The pitch clock does speed up the games, and you're right. It's the nature of the game is what plays into it, and you could not have done that with the Cardinals Blue Jays opener. Did yesterday in a game even with 7 walks in it. It was a whole lot quicker, and we talked about the Yankees game on Thursday, their Yankees opener with the San Francisco Giants taking 2 hours and 30, I think it's 2:32 if I remember correctly, or 2:35, something like that, in which there were 32 strikeouts. 32 of them, 16 by each team. That's a lot of whiffing.
Yeah, well, that's the way the game's played, though. It's an all or nothing sort of game these days, and we've talked about this in the past. It's not something, as a baseball purist, that I like to see, and I think that with the shift going out of the game, and I think with the pitch clock coming into the game, I think you're going to see it change a little bit. Maybe go back to the direction that hitting. There's going to be a premium paid on guys that hit 320, 330, 340 like it used to be, as opposed to these guys that come up and just clop the ball all over the place.
Well, I think it'll make the games quicker. There's no question about that. But it's going to take, in my opinion, the pitchers about a quarter of the season to get used to it with their rhythm, because a lot of them, this does not fit into their scheme of things as far as pitching is concerned. It'll take them a while to come around, and that's not everybody. But I think it bothered Flaherty yesterday watching the Cardinals. He had to get back in there within the prescribed time, and I think he had problem adjusting. That's all mental as opposed to physical. But this is affecting a lot of the other pitchers too, I think. And let's make a judgment on that after about, maybe the middle part of June and see where we stand.
Did you see any clock violations in your game?
I do believe there was one. One happened, and there were a couple real close ones where the windup for the pitcher started at the 1 second mark, but it's not get the pitch out, it starts your windup. So there was just the one violation, and it did not come at I think it made an 0-1 count, a 1-1 count, and we probably allowed a hit, but with 19 hits, we probably allowed a hit in every at-bat you saw. So it didn't affect. It didn't have a big impact as far as I almost said shot clock violation, a pitch clock violation, but you felt it whenever, there were those at bats, especially when there's no runners on base. It's pitch, balls back to pitcher, pitch. I mean, Michaelis had a real good rhythm. He was probably starting on a 15-second pitch clock. He was getting that pitch out with 8 or 7 seconds left still on the clock. They were moving, and then they were hitting.
I watched the Yankees game yesterday. I think I saw 4 violations, including one at the beginning of an inning that the umpire came out and said, ball 1, before the batter had even stepped in the box, because the pitcher had not gotten ready to pitch in the prescribed amount of time.
I'm really curious to see at some point this year there's going to be a calculated, we want to change pitchers and intentionally walk this guy. How do we give our pitcher in the bullpen more time to warm up? We're going to sit here, stand still, and have 4 pitch clock violations trigger in a row.
Could happen.
So, I'm waiting for that to happen.
So just for clarification's sake, explain what you're talking about, because I'm still a little confused on this. The pitch clock is how many seconds?
It's 2. There are 2. One, if nobody's on base, 15 seconds.
Okay.
The pitch, and as Alec pointed out, is when he starts his windup. That's when the clock stops. In other words, if the time elapses before that, it's automatic ball. If there's a runner on base, it's 20 seconds.
Okay, so the pitcher has 15 or 20 seconds to start his windup.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Otherwise, it's a violation. But the batter has to be in the box with 10 seconds left on. So he's got 5 seconds or 10 seconds if there's a batter or a runner on base.
If the batter is going out and
to get ready,
delaying, and he has 10 seconds to get back in that box and be ready for the time that pitcher's in his warm-up. If not, that's an automatic strike.
So there's a 5 to 10 second gap there where the batter has to be ready, but the pitcher can still be getting ready.
Correct.
Essentially. Okay.
Or working through, likely working with your catcher. What's the call? What are we going to be pitching?
Okay.
Here?
Now it's clear to me. I was getting confused because the violations were being called on pitchers, but the batter.
I haven't seen it take place yet, manifested in any game, is the pitcher is only allowed to throw over to first base twice per batter.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Runner. And, if a guy throws over twice, that guy, he's taking a lead halfway off the.
Yeah, because he can, yeah.
Steffi Graf just came out of the crowd to join the pickleball match that was going on.
Oh, really? Is she playing on the same team with her husband there, Agassi?
No, she went. She took McEnroe's place for a minute. It was a little strange. I was like, that's Steffi Graf that came out of the crowd there. I'm excited to see what the overall changes and I can tell a difference in the feel of a baseball game, because sometimes if you're kind of not, I'll admit I'm bad about zoning out on baseball games. That's one of the reasons why I love it.
Oh, yeah.
I just can zone out for a second. It's like, oh, the inning's over? Really? What happened? My wife got up yesterday and came back in the room. She says, the game over? I said, yeah. She goes, what happened? I said, the Yankees lost. And she goes, man, that was quick. Just ended that quickly. But I did see 4 violations yesterday. They do have a certain prescribed time that they have to be ready to start the new inning, and also too, the batter has to be in the box and ready at a certain time too, or a strike can be automatically called on the batter.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting to me because baseball traditionally, non-purists like you guys, like me, I'm not a purist. I like baseball, and I want to get into baseball more this year than I've ever in the past. But baseball traditionally for me, I always called it a boring sport because there's so much stop and pitch, and with all the batters' intricacies and superstitious stuff and everything, it really, for me, it just made it to where I'm zoning out a lot. So I'm curious to see because I don't think I'll be that way as much because they're putting a time frame on when these guys have to be ready, and then let's play this game. So it'll be interesting. I'm excited to watch it.
I would want to say, Ned, I believe there was one case on opening day with the number of throws over to first. Ronald Acuna, they tried to pick him off twice, and then you saw him realize, like, they can't throw over to me. He slipped and fell.
Oh, no.
I think he was so excited to be like, this is a free bag. He slipped.
Did they tag him out?
Nah, he was able to get up and go back to first and that, but that was the one example I've seen where they couldn't go pick him off. He just got so excited. Just ended up
The
slipping.
baseball gods are not kind.
That's right. When we come back, we'll slide in a little Chiefs talk. It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Let's talk about the Chiefs. Let's talk about what's going on in football this offseason because there's still a lot of storylines that are developing as we head towards the draft. Now, Ned, explain all this to me because I've just gotten bits and pieces of it. What was the hubbub about Thursday night football?
Well, the National Football League, the owners, they want to have this. A team can play two Thursday night games, and the players, and Patrick Mahomes is one of them, don't want that. They think that's too much of a strain on them. NFL comes back with the argument that we've done research and it doesn't affect their physical well-being, which I think is balderdash. Mm-hmm. The argument to it is, well, if you're off Thursday night, you're going to have an extended weekend and plenty of time to rest up and prepare for your next game. And that's a positive, but there's a negative in playing games within 4 days of each other, and I personally think that's a little much. Whether or not that's passed, and it has not yet, and the National Football League has tabled. That's a euphemism for we just might not want to think about this. There are several individuals in sports, and I'm talking about a player's standpoint now, who can govern what happens. LeBron James in the NBA, he's the biggest name. If he gripes about something, well, everybody listens. In baseball, Scherzer or some other big name can gripe about something, and people would listen. One in football, Patrick Mahomes, and he was not in favor of that Thursday. Oh, well, let's think about this now, boys. We'll just put this on the table for a while. Well, that was the argument that the same team can play, and they can flex the games, is what it was talked about. In other words, if a team is scheduled to play on a Sunday, we can flex it to Thursday late in the season. That's putting a pretty big strain on some of these teams, so I do understand the argument there.
I think I know the answer to this question, but let me go ahead and ask it anyway. Do you pay attention to all the mock draft talk at all?
How about none?
Really? Mm-hmm. Why not?
Because
no interest
it doesn't mean anything, and you've seen so many variations. Thus and such, and website something or other, things that thus and such, who did something great in the combine. Come on, people. The NFL scouts are right there. They're looking over all of this, and they don't necessarily make public what they're thinking. They can't. They do. They're giving away their trade secrets here.
Yeah.
No, and furthermore, there's too much of it anyway.
Well, let me ask you about that, too. I mean, how do you feel about there being almost there's a whole industry started basically by Mel Kiper around the draft.
I'm wondering what the hell these guys do for a living.
Well, that's what Mel Kiper does.
That is all Mel Kiper does.
That is pretty much. I mean, he did these draft bulletins and mock drafts, and he's become a household name.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me, I mean, how it's changed. And you've talked about this several times about, the network's going to Pete Rozelle and saying, hey, let's broadcast this thing.
Why? What's the answer? And that's exactly what he said. Guys, I'm, as you well know, long enough of tooth that I remember when it was nothing. Hey, the NFL teams are going to have their draft, so what? When I first went to KY3, you followed the draft off the AP wire, and they'd send over, and it would be all-inclusive, round 6, round 7, round 8. Of course, now they only do they only do 7 rounds. They used to do about 20 or 25 or 30 of them. That's where the Mr. Irrelevant came into play, because the last guy picked, and it was up around 30 or 31 or 32, he was irrelevant. Not now, because the NFL doesn't waste players. They only have the 7 rounds to get it done. So the last one at number 7 is hardly what you would call an irrelevant. Who's it? Brock Purdy?
Brock Purdy this year.
Yep. He's a good player. No, so it's kind of a paradox in a way. But over and above all that, no, Joe, the answer to your question is I don't. We'll see what happens. We'll see how things develop in late April.
I'm fascinated by it, not because I'm so in draft, but just following the Chiefs and looking at how they construct this roster every year to try to keep themselves, it's an arms race. I mean, that's the best way to describe it in football, is you're trying to keep up with your neighbor. You're trying to stay on top of the game. And there's this salary cap that makes everything, almost Rubik's Cube-like, that if you turn one way, you can do something, but if you don't, you've got to do this. And it makes it really interesting, and I think it also adds a lot of parity to football. But I'll be honest with you, I've followed the mock drafts more this year than what I have in the past. And the interesting thing that I've taken away from them is the Chiefs definitely seem to be in your camp, Ned, that they're drafting, according to all the experts, I got the air quotes there, drafting for depth.
They have to. They're a good team. They're a very good team. They're a world championship team. But you never are solid unless you have a bench to work with and have those players, and the Chiefs do. They have an influx of individuals coming in off the bench who can come in and sub for, not quarterback, but in other key positions. And that's what you're looking for, the young players, especially at running back and D-backs and so forth and so on, at those key positions where they can't really afford to lose some of their top players. But let's bring them in off the bench and see what we can develop.
Interesting to get the viewpoint of Alec and Josh. They come at it from different sides. Alec is a Steelers fan. Do you follow the draft at all?
Yes, quite a bit. And so I'm pretty opposite Ned. I have fun with it. I think it's it's an interesting science to watch these mock drafts come out, because they're getting made by people who have sources inside teams, sources who are very much, benefit from lying. They don't want you to know who they actually want to go with. So they're going to, you can get an idea of who they like, who they don't, but it almost comes down to, the more attention a team is paying to a guy, the less likely I would feel they're actually going to go with them, because they don't want you to know the guy they've got circled on their board. They want that guy to fall to them. So I have fun with it. I think it's an enjoyable time. It's cool to watch all these guys going from college to the pros, dreams getting, realized, all that hard work paying off when they get drafted. It's probably a little too much. It's grown into a booming thing. The NFL draft viewership, I would check the numbers, but I'd be willing to bet it matches up against an NBA Finals game or a World Series game at this point, because the NFL is just the biggest thing in sports in America right now.
Josh, your viewpoint's different than Alec, because you're an Alabama fan and you are rooting for those guys to get drafted, as many as possible.
Oh yeah, that's true. And I have absolutely no interest in the draft. I will look at the result just to see where the Alabama players went and go, oh, that's cool. That'll be a good fit for him. Or, oh, that sucks because now he's a rival of the Chiefs or whatever. But I think I'm one of those guys who I don't think they should interview players after a game. I mean, I think you get these guys are adrenaline junkies. And when you are coming up to them right after a win or right after a loss and trying to get a good soundbite, I think that's ridiculous. And to me, the draft is a similar thing because here's this kid. These guys are still kids. They're 18, or maybe a little, who knows. And they suddenly have been given, here it is. You're going to the NFL. You just got drafted by the Green Bay Packers, so you're going to get a big contract. Tell us how you feel. I hate that. I just hate it because I'm like, what do you want them to say? I feel great. That's awesome. So anyway, I don't watch the draft.
Josh, I am with you, but it's in another context. It's with the coaches.
Oh, I'm the same way with coaches too, because your team just lost the NCAA tournament. How do you feel?
I saw the ultimate last Saturday or Sunday, whenever it was, in a women's game. LSU is playing, and I must admit I've forgotten who they were playing, but it was an Elite Eight game to get to the Final Four. Kim Mulkey, who is she's been at LSU now for 2 years, but Baylor for 23 years, great star player at Louisiana Tech, mother of the Cardinals' prospective shortstop, I think, Kramer Robertson, but over and above that, a firebrand from the word go who can't stand to be interviewed like that, tells it like it is. Her team is winning, but it's a terrible game. And the gal gets in there and says, Coach, how do you feel about this? And she says, this is the worst game I've ever seen. This is a horrible game. If I were home watching this on TV, I would have turned it off. I'm out of here. This is great.
Here's my obligatory XFL comment. They try to interview the coaches and the players during the game to give you the perspective. And they went to one of the XFL coaches and they asked him, what do you think about your team's play? And he was like, it's awful. We're bad. We're really bad. We've got to do something different, and this is the middle of the game. He says, if we need to get some new players in here by next week, then maybe that's what we've got to do. And I was like, wow, that was a little refreshing to hear from there.
Brings you back to the days of John McKay when he coached the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were really bad.
Yeah. They were 0-0.
They were
their
0
first
for 27.
their first 2 seasons they went 0 for.
The reporter said, Coach, how do you feel about the execution for your next game? He said, yeah, I'd be in favor of that.
When we come back, we'll tell you what we're going to watch on TV this afternoon. I bet it won't be pickleball, but we'll see.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Such a great time of the year. So much going on. Baseball starting, basketball, the March Madness. We get Masters start next weekend or the weekend after?
No, this weekend.
So that's fantastic. Even if you're not a golf fan, just watching that course and just taking all that in, the pageantry of the Masters.
What is their slogan?
A tradition unlike any other.
If anybody beats the NFL in marketing, it's got to be the Masters.
Yeah.
If anybody does.
Definitely.
So, and of course, you mentioned earlier too, Josh. Let's get this in here about there's some major hockey story going on right now.
The Boston Bruins are poised to win more games in a regular season than any team in hockey history. They only need 3 more wins, we think, out of their last 6 or 7. They have dominated. So in hockey, with a win you get 2 points, with a tie you get 1. So and they play 82 games. They have 123 points right now. So it is insane how dominant they've been this season.
Here's your over-under question for the day. They play the St. Louis Blues this afternoon at the Kiel Center. At least I believe it's an afternoon game, opposite the Cardinals, which is right down the road at Busch Stadium. Do the Blues sell out? Blues aren't even in the playoff picture.
No.
Do they sell out their game?
No, they don't. No, I love hockey, but not very many people do. So I don't think they'll. The only way that they would possibly sell out that game is if it was to be the record breaker, and it's not. They're still a couple games away, but.
And then we've got the XFL going on, and the USFL is getting ready to start in about a week. And I'm fascinated by the marketing because the XFL's got The Rock, and they're on Fox Sports, and I think they're also on somebody else is carrying the games. ABC's carrying some of the games on XFL.
If they do, it'll be a little bit later on, but the USFL is on Fox over the air.
Yep.
And NBC over the air.
Oh, wow.
That's going to get them automatically higher ratings. Just there's no question about it. They can't help but get higher ratings. The XFL, this is a battle between these two fledgling leagues, spring leagues. I don't know. I don't know if either one of them succeeds.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to watch. And then, of course, here in Springfield, in a couple of years, we'll have arena football.
Mm-hmm. Well, next year.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. I'm excited for that. So, Ned, what are you going to do? You going to go home this afternoon and watch some pickleball?
No, this is spring training for the lawnmower today. So
Oh, my.
I'm going to break it out today, try a little. It's not going to take very long. And then I do want to watch a little bit of the Iowa LSU women's championship game.
What about you, Alec?
Probably going to be a hot swap of Cardinal game, Blues game, and then the Iowa LSU matchup.
You're going to watch hockey?
My wife this year made it a goal to get into hockey, and she has really stuck with that. She's watched almost every Blues game.
I like
that has
your
been.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Would you like an intervention? Would you like us to come over and help out with that?
Nah, she loves it, and I love it for her. And, so I've watched a bit with her, but I'm willing to bet she'll want to have that on as well. But yeah, it'll be a 3-sport race going over at our place, which just following the. Commercial hits one, we'll jump to the next one.
All right. What about you, Josh?
I'm going to watch the women's championship and then whatever baseball I can find after that.
I was mad, and the most ridiculous thing about baseball is these stupid blackout rules that they have.
Yeah.
And I tuned over to watch the Yankees-Giants. It was blacked out.
What?
It was blacked out.
In
I couldn't-
Springfield,
I couldn't-
Missouri?
I couldn't watch it for whatever reason. Anyway, thanks, guys. We'll see you next Sunday when we're back in the studio to do another round of Ned Talk. Ned Reynolds, Alex Scott, Josh Roberts, myself, Joe Westen. The show is brought to you by the fine folks here at Midwest Family Broadcasting, including Mike the Intern, Brian Tyndall, Corbin Campbell, and Nick Fury. We'll see you next Sunday.